what happens if a Jew claims Davidic lineage? Really, nothing happens. Nothing happens. He doesn't become king. You know what I mean? Like, we don't go, okay, here's your throne. And a claim is a claim. We can go, you have Davidic lineage, can they prove it? What's the proof that they drew a line like this and they can name all the ancestors in between? It's pretty good that they could draw a lineage. Like I was saying before, at the end of the day, do we know that all their facts are correct? No. Do we know they didn't make it up? No, we don't know that. So what's the consequence of that? It's absolutely nothing. Meaning, in the end of the day, yes, Mashiach, the Messiah, will come from a Davidic line, a paternal Davidic line, and we're not proclaiming him king until he fulfills the criteria that the Tanakh requires. We could conjecture that any of these people might be the Messiah. We could guess about it, but there's no certainty, until it happens. And that's the law. There's no certainty until it happens. And so the fact that he claims Davidic lineage is pretty much meaningless. Like, okay, so you're just another guy like me. That's all. You don't know any special treatment. If a person claims to be the Messiah, we're also not impressed. It doesn't mean anything until you do what the book says. So even if the lineage is true, and let's assume it is, let's assume, like I said, we go based on oral tradition in the family, great. So you're a descendant of David. Doesn't make him any different than me or the next guy. Yes, Mashiach will come from a Davidic family, but we don't know who Mashiach is until he does it. We don't presume beforehand. And aside from that, there could be many Davidic descendants. It's almost certainly many Davidic descendants who don't know they're descended from David. That doesn't invalidate them from being a candidate for being Mashiach. Like, just for example, I could be Mashiach because even though I don't know my tribal lineage, it doesn't mean I'm not descended from David. Who says I'm not descended from David? Unless you could prove I'm not descended from David, then I could be Mashiach. But I'm not, because I haven't done what qualifies a person to be Mashiach. You know what I mean? Will it happen one day? Will I fight the wars of God and gather in the exiles and build the third temple? Listen, I'm only 42 and the night is young. You know what I mean? I don't personally have ambitions to be the guy. I don't have any pretensions. I'm not trying to be that, and maybe that's just the guy we need, because the guy who says I'm Mashiach is the egotistical guy who's going to get us in trouble. And we had many false messiahs in the past who were like that. So I'm just saying, like, I'm almost making a joke out of it. Like, I could be Mashiach. But the point is, the fact that a person has a claim of Davidic lineage is just, that's all it is. It's just that we just nod our heads and smile and go, that's nice. We don't doubt it. We could doubt it. I'm saying we could believe you, but it doesn't change anything. Mashiach is, by the law, Mashiach is the guy who does the things that Mashiach is prophesied to do. When he does it, he's the guy. Simple as that. So yeah, okay. Now the other question. Let's go to your other question, KL. Yeah.
How about if the DNA, does it prove anything? Yeah.
Great question. This is an emerging area of knowledge. So I'll tell you where it began, and I'll tell you, to my knowledge, where it is now. And I'm not very knowledgeable in this area. I'm not active in this area of legal decision-making or research. But the issue of DNA began with an experiment, I think, that was done between an Israeli scientist and an American scientist, where they had this brilliant light bulb idea. They said, wait a second, if DNA can indicate someone's lineage, And we Jews have an oral tradition that everyone who claims to be a Kohen is descended from Aaron the priest, then we should be able to find in their DNA a definite link that identifies they are all of one genetic lineage. It's open and shut. Like that is the prediction science would make. So they did it. They got Kohanim together from Israel, from America, from Morocco, from Russia, from every country and every different community they could imagine. The exiles scattered all over the world. Every community has Kohanim. They descend from Aaron, according to oral tradition. So they brought them all, a sampling from all of them together, and they tested their DNA. Over 90%, something like 95% of them all had a specific genetic, I'm calling it a genetic marker, just means sort of like a mutation in the DNA that was particular to all these people and not found in the broader population, but specifically found among males in the lineage of the Kohanic family. And so this became known as the CMH, the Kohanic modal haplotype. That's the fancy name for this genetic mutation that is unique to Kohanim. And basically we say this is a genetic marker from Aaron the priest. There's no way to prove that. And that was one of the criticisms of the study, is that genetic study proves that all Kohanim are descended from Aaron. And it proves the existence of Aaron. And some of the study, the criticism that came out was, you can't prove the existence of Aaron. Okay, they have a common ancestor. We have no idea who that was. Oh, it's true that based on the variations in the genome, they can count the number of mutations and somehow trace back the number of generations. It places him just about 4,000 years ago ish. How precise that is. Pretty kind of in the time frame where we would expect. So some people got a little too excited about it on a religious level, but yes, we definitely traced the Kohanim. So then they expanded it. They said, wait a second. So let's try this with all Jews, because all Jews, essentially, like I just told you, claim the oral tradition to be descended from a common ancestor. So except for converts. So let's check the whole Jewish community. And they checked Jews from this community, that community. After you do the Kohanim from all the community, why are you surprised by this? And they found that they were able to discover that there is a genetic commonality in, a very large percentage, taking into account the genes of people who convert from other ethnic groups. There is a large percentage of a clear genetic pattern that indicates descent from a common ancestor, more so than in any other group. So if you compare Jews to Chinese, right, you won't find this similarity. If you compare Jews to sub-Saharan Africans, you won't find it. If you compare it to white Europeans, meaning even if you compare the Ashkenazi Jew, me, who's light-skinned and comes from Russia and has many features of Eastern European non-Jews, physical features, on the deep genetic level, we are much more genetically similar to the dark-skinned Middle Eastern Jew that who speaks Arabic and has more Arabian-looking features. Genetically, we are more similar to them than we are to the white Europeans, or that those Sephardic populations are to the Arabs, right? And then if you look at the next closest genetic family, it's Middle Eastern non-Jews, Arabs, people indigenous to the land of Israel, and non-Jews, etc. They've mapped out like the different genetic families around the earth. And now if you do 23andMe or whatever these DNA tests, you find there's a distinct group of Ashkenazic Jewry, Sephardic Jewry. Yeah, we can see differences in the lineages, but we confirm that they do branch together as a specific Jewish group that is definitely most closely related to Middle Eastern populations. So we know, not only by oral tradition now, but by genetic confirmation, that the Jewish population throughout the world, by and large, is a group that is genetically descended from a Middle Eastern group some couple thousand years ago, and are all related in that way, and also distinct from other populations in that way. So now, when it comes to, do we use that information to determine someone's legal status according to Jewish law? Early on, we said no. This is not a factor that we find in our literature, traditional literature, that can confer Jewish status, that can confer Kohanic status, etc. And for good reason. Especially in Kohanim, we may have an oral tradition for the father, but who the mother is also significant. So even if you could prove patrilineal descent, if we don't know necessarily the mothers, then we have a problem. If the mother's not, if we have a non-Jewish mother, even though he may be genetically related to the Kohanic genes, but according to Jewish law, he's not even Jewish without a Jewish mother. So the tribe is totally irrelevant. And even within the tribe, if a Kohen marries a divorcee, which he's forbidden to do, the child doesn't have the status of the sanctity of a Kohen that he can perform the duties of a Kohen. He sort of loses that sanctity. So there are certain things we need to know about the lineage, even despite the DNA on the patrilineal side. So there's good reason to say it has no bearing in Jewish law. And we also haven't been ready to determine that the ones that we don't find that genetic haplotype in there, that somehow slipped in there, right? We don't invalidate them based on DNA evidence, because we don't have information in our tradition that's a determinative factor. It's sort of an interesting thing, but it doesn't really weigh in Jewish law because it's not part of our tradition. That was in the beginning. Now, lately, I've heard, and like I said, I'm not up in this, but I've heard through the grapevine, in the name of great contemporary scholars in the Jewish world, Orthodox, that now we do consider genetic evidence in determining whether a person is Jewish, because we have matrilineal DNA, which is the more important determining factor in someone's Jewishness, is if the mother was Jewish, although it doesn't convey tribal affiliation. So that it used to be a person would come out of the woodwork and he would have some evidence, family paraphernalia, family traditions, photos, that, hey, my grandmother died and I went into the attic and I opened her old chest of things and I found these Jewish trinkets, and it seems like my grandmother was Jewish and she never told that to us. It's not so uncommon that when Jews came to America, fleeing from persecution, they totally hid their Jewish identity, even from their children, so their children would not face persecution. And there are generations that just discover, hey, my grandmother was Jewish, right? And if we can determine that in a definite way, we say, oh, matrilineal descent makes you Jewish. And there's a lot of stories like that. But how do we prove that in a legal way, besides, oh, I have this photo, or I found this little Jewish star, or, I remember my grandmother used to light candles Friday night for some weird reason. We did require, until recently, legal documentation. You had to find your grandmother's wedding certificate, which would be a very specific Jewish Hebrew document with witnesses signed on it, Jewish witnesses, or a gravestone in a Jewish graveyard, which would definitely convey certitude that an ancestor was Jewish. We accept the evidence from the tombstone. We accept evidence from a marriage certificate. These are legally acceptable. And like I said in the beginning, DNA was like interesting but irrelevant. I heard recently that now they are accepting, at least some contemporary legal authorities in the Orthodox world are accepting genetic evidence along the matrilineal line to determine that a person has matrilineal Jewish descent, which makes them definitively a Jew. I don't know much about that. I'm not saying that with certitude. I don't know if that's agreed upon universally, but it's sort of like breakthrough changes in the way that we are looking at genetic evidence. And that's about all I know on the subject. So I hope that's somewhat instructive.